They could be cataloging changes between different time periods. Each emergence event was basically a temporal snapshot of human civilization. The Hudson Valley area isn't comparable to our confirmed threshold points. The deepest parts of the Hudson River Valley and surrounding continental shelf only reach about 200 meters. The threshold points we monitored consistently occurred in zones between 3,000, 4,000 meters deep. The Hudson Valley area simply doesn't have the depth conditions we associated with emergence events. Even the deepest parts of the New York Bight only reach about 2,000 meters. The non-ET determination comes from quantum acoustic analysis. The objects show specific adaptations to Earth's deep ocean physics. They utilize pressure differentials and water density gradients in ways that wouldn't make sense for craft designed for space travel. It's like finding a submarine with gills. The engineering was clearly made for our oceans. The critical threshold isn't mystical. It's basic mathematical modeling. When you plot emergence events over time, you get an exponential curve. Example, 2014, average 15 events/month. 2018, average 25 events month. 2022, average 40 events/month. Last projection, trending toward 100 plus monthly. This is verifiable data from our sensor arrays, not speculation. As for mapping behavior, we're not reading minds, we're doing pattern analysis. Example, object emerges from Puerto Rico Trench, follows precise grid pattern over Norfolk Naval Base, hovers at consistent intervals, maintains exact distance from key facilities, repeats pattern weekly with 99.7% consistency. Multiply this by hundreds of tracked events over a decade. When you overlay their movement patterns with infrastructure maps, the correlation coefficient is astronomical. This isn't interpretation, it's statistical analysis. The conclusions follow the evidence. The fact that they maintained perfect positioning relative to key infrastructure points while phasing through different electromagnetic frequencies suggests this was far more sophisticated than just taking pictures. But keep believing they're just high-tech Google vans if that helps you sleep better at night. The Arctic has its own deep water features that could potentially serve as threshold points, particularly the Fram Strait. There were reports of activity in that region, but my work on the program's quantum sonar arrays was primarily focused on our 3 confirmed threshold points. I did hear from colleagues that the Fram Strait was a hotbed of activity, especially during periods of significant ice melt. Russian research vessels were also active in that area. Would have been interesting to get our arrays up there. Curiously enough, you got a couple details right, but in the wrong context. Interesting read. Some of the observations align with our data, particularly regarding electromagnetic field manipulation. I never saw evidence of any formal treaties or contact, but then again, that wasn't really my area of expertise. We are destroying their habitat, and they are destroying ours. We are absolutely destroying their habitat, but in over 10 years of monitoring these objects, we never documented a single aggressive action, not one. 396577821#. We spent over a decade collecting hard sensor data, and we had contact with other teams studying the project, but most of the info they had was heavily compartmentalized. Our team focused specifically on quantum sonar analysis and pattern tracking. We'd occasionally get sanitized intelligence reports or cross-reference data with other branches, like with our bio team. But most info was need to know, especially towards the end. I don't claim to know their intentions, never did, once. Did we try to communicate or fight those things? Our military has encounters with them fairly regularly. The Pentagon videos just happen to be the ones that went public, but there's an extensive catalog of footage, video, images, audio, sonar, thermal, radar, etc., that never will go public, at least not yet. What's interesting is that some footage online is actually legitimate. You know how one of the Pentagon videos that was confirmed to be legit had been floating around on a UFO forum since 2007? Yeah, there's a lot of real stuff already online. Don't get me wrong, most videos and images are bullshit, but I've seen a lot of footage that shows what I would consider similar base configurations and movement patterns we tracked, especially since NJ got hot. The really compelling stuff never leaves secure facilities, for the most part. Also, as far as I'm aware, we never had any successful two-way communication or controlled interaction. How much does Congress knows? Based on the internal fights I witnessed, different committees probably have different pieces of information. The recent public hearings barely scratched the surface. Any advice for the general population? Keep calm. We can't stop whatever is coming, so there's no point in panicking. Do not live in fear. Base off the coast of Malibu, Lowell. 396599914#. I have no data on anything like this. They don't exactly go invisible in the traditional sense, but they can move at speeds and manipulate electromagnetic fields in ways that make them effectively undetectable to conventional systems or the naked eye. We did occasionally track objects moving through that area after emerging from the Puerto Rico Trench, but there was nothing unique about their behavior there compared to other zones. Your point about the seed vault is interesting. Our data showed these objects had a particular interest in what we called critical sustainability infrastructure, not just military installations and power grids, but also research facilities, environmental monitoring stations, and yes, preservation sites. Just to be clear, we track spheres, not cubes. Never saw a cube. Oblong spheroid, the tic-tac shape, and the perfect sphere, typically 5-8 meters in diameter, were their true form. Any other shapes people report seeing could likely be the result of their mimicry capabilities or simply an incorrect depiction of the sighting. 396604666#. As far as I can tell, no. I have no information about an actual manufacturing facility. The threshold points we monitored weren't structures or bases. They were areas of localized physical anomalies. The quantum sonar arrays would detect a buildup of activity before emergence events. First, we'd see localized magnetic anomalies forming in these zones. Then the seafloor topology would start showing that characteristic smoothing effect in a perfect circle. The electromagnetic disturbances would gradually intensify over several hours or even days until they reached what we called a resonance point. When an object emerged, it didn't just appear. The arrays would detect it rising through different pressure gradients, maintaining constant velocity despite the crushing depths. Again, no cavitation, no acoustic signature, just smooth transition through the water column. The threshold points would remain active for varying periods. Sometimes single emergences, other times multiple objects would use the same point over several hours before the zone would return to normal. By 2022, we were seeing multiple threshold points activating simultaneously, which had never happened in the program's earlier years. 396605991#. An egg is pretty close to a sphere, I guess. LOL, joking aside, anything Coulthard touches is bullshit. For the record, again, we never once in over 10 years detected a crash or malfunction. They don't crash. There are no crash retrievals, period. There is no conflict here, but let me clarify the distinction. When I said they don't follow Earth's magnetic field, I meant they don't passively track the pole movement like migrating animals do. Instead, our sonar data showed they actively manipulate and generate their own electromagnetic fields. But this manipulation requires Earth's magnetic field as a fundamental medium to work with, like how a jet engine needs atmospheric air to generate thrust, but isn't constrained to follow wind patterns. The objects can move freely against or across Earth's magnetic field lines, but they still need that base field to interact with. That's why we believe they can't leave Earth's magnetosphere, not because they follow the field, but because they need it as a medium for their propulsion system to function. The quantum arrays showed their technology is specifically adapted to work within Earth's electromagnetic environment, even though they're not bound by its natural patterns. Maybe. Based on our analysis, the physics involved suggests a theoretical possibility of large-scale field displacement. The arrays detected what we called quantum field bubbles around these objects, so basically, zones where conventional physics temporarily ceased to function, similar to the threshold points but somewhat mobile. In theory, an object generating these effects could extend the field to encompass a larger volume. The quantum acoustic signatures we measured during actual aircraft encounters showed momentary phase matching between the object and aircraft electromagnetic profiles. By early 2022, we were seeing synchronized effects across multiple sites. Theoretically, this same mechanism could create a mobile threshold point around an aircraft, essentially treating it as an emergence event in reverse. Hope the explanation makes sense. Still, it's pure speculation based on our sensor data, but the physics suggests it's possible. The temporal inversion data was just one theory explored to explain their systematic survey patterns. The millisecond precursor signals we detected before emergence events suggested possible temporal effects, but again, just a theory. Also, the focus isn't exclusively on America. That's absolute drivel that MSM, social media, and Reddit people want you to believe. Civilians see these objects everywhere. Don't get fooled, Anon. Research public data, you'll quickly see I'm correct. There's multiple countries researching this: US, Russia, China. India's been quietly monitoring activity in the Indian Ocean, and several European nations have deep-water monitoring programs tracking the same phenomena. Most militaries have shitloads of recorded interactions with them. Cattle mutilations. These objects were detected moving inland from emergence points, and yes, many of those times, to rural and agricultural areas. There's a possibility they could be involved with cattle mutilation, but I personally don't have any data on that specifically. 2027. As for 2027, look, people love to pick significant dates. The exponential increase in emergence events we tracked through 2023 was already beyond our worst-case projections. For all I know, this could be the year they finally decide to go one step beyond observation and mapping. Don't buy into people pointing out specific dates. Nobody knows. That's why our government is scared and isn't sure how to proceed from where we currently are. These things operate on their own timeline. I'll give this thread another 2 or 3 hours, then I'll be off, friends. If they wanted to eliminate humanity, they absolutely could, and with relatively little effort based on what we observed. Consider the capabilities we tracked: perfect electromagnetic field manipulation, physics-defying movement, and structural transformation, something that can alter matter at that level and move through any medium without resistance. They could probably take out every major population center globally within 24 hours. We'd have to nuke ourselves and commit some sort of collective suicide to fight back. Actually, something interesting started happening in late 2022. Their mimicry began showing noticeable flaws. The way they handle light and shadows is increasingly wrong. They fail to align with prevailing ambient light conditions, often appearing distorted or inconsistent with the expected behavior of physical objects. Their use of FAA-mandated lighting frequently fails too. We've tracked instances where strobes were blinking too quickly, too slowly, or even in non-standard colors. It's like they're getting sloppy, bird poop. That, or I'm really not as well informed as I think I am. Good shit, all great captures. The triangles are human in origin, but they are also capable of mimicking said triangles. Special FX or AI with some manual editing. Definitely not real. OP, what do you think of Aguadaya? The footage is absolutely genuine. The splitting behavior is particularly fascinating because it may relate to those temporal inversions I mentioned earlier. As I mentioned before, our quantum arrays would sometimes detect an object's signature milliseconds before it physically appeared. In cases of apparent splitting, we'd see overlapping temporal signatures, as if the same object was briefly existing at multiple points in its own timeline. This could explain what we're seeing in here. Not necessarily an object dividing, but potentially intersecting with itself across microsecond temporal variations. As for the visibility itself, they don't go invisible in the traditional sense. Rather, they can manipulate electromagnetic fields to either mimic other objects or move at speeds/frequencies that make them effectively undetectable to conventional systems. In the Aguadilla case, we're likely seeing them in a transitional state where they're not actively mimicking anything or manipulating fields for concealment. I respect Valley's work. I think his trickster theory and our observational data aren't necessarily in conflict. Our arrays would detect subtle variations in their electromagnetic signatures when they knew they were being observed, almost like they were responding to monitoring. Not quite Valley's cosmic theater, but definitely a level of awareness and reaction to being watched. The recent decline in mimicry quality could actually support both perspectives. From our military viewpoint, it suggested operational priorities shifting away from perfect concealment. But viewed through Valley's lens, these mistakes could be deliberately theatrical. They're clearly advanced enough to hide perfectly when they want to. So when they don't, is it really a mistake? Gray aliens swimming outside their craft, freely in the ocean. Redditor got trolled by his friend, with the amount of bullshit the grifters spew, they're bound to be correct once in a while. They're monitoring dependencies, power grids, water treatment facilities, and a lot of military bases. They seem focused on interconnected systems and network nodes, not just physical infrastructure, but points where different systems intersect. I don't have concrete data on this as far as I'm aware, yes. They're not interested whatsoever in talking to us. You develop a strange acceptance, but I won't sugarcoat it. I think we're fucked. Still, you learn to live with it. Same way you learn to live knowing a major earthquake could hit at any time. YouTube and Reddit, sorry, I know, are a goldmine. Especially the really old stuff, if you know how to use search filters. So much has been deleted in the last few years, it's quite sad, actually. 3966724#. What were your thoughts on the Jake Barber interview? An absolute circus, as expected. They took a 15-second clip and made this huge piece that made the UFO community look like absolutely insane monkeys. Nobody even falls for this shit anymore. It's just time wasting. The video doesn't even belong to Jake. It's from an unverifiable source, LOL. Also, Jake is a damn liar. They displayed his documentation and destroyed his credibility. He never served for AFSOC. He was an aerospace maintenance guy for his entire AF career, and his enlistment contract said Combat Controller Apprentice, which pretty much confirms that he never even completed CCT training. He's no expert, and the photos in the piece are staged. At this point, it feels like they're literally making fun of us and aren't even trying to be clever anymore. Ross is a clown. I'm not going to confirm or deny things outside what I personally observed or heard through the program. I was very clear throughout this entire thread that I can only speak to what I'm 100% sure of, or at least theories and speculation grounded in what I know is real. Throughout my time in the program, I watched different branches fight over control of information, undermine each other's findings, and jealously guard their own data. The whole system is designed to keep people in their lanes. I could easily go on News Nation tomorrow, spin an elaborate tale about crash retrievals and alien bodies, maybe write a book and hit the convention circuit. Shitloads of people have made careers doing exactly that. Are there be aspects I wasn't privy to? Of course. Doesn't mean the disinfo agents aren't real, and I should take their claims into account. The manifesto from the Sean Ryan podcast is fake, and that whole story is a psyop. Claiming U.S. and China are responsible behind the drone tech we're seeing is laughable. Watch for commercial aircraft where the shadows don't quite match the sun's position, or where the FAA strobes blink in odd patterns or the colors don't match. Pay attention to weather that doesn't move with prevailing winds, especially near power stations or military bases. The signatures we tracked showed they can maintain position regardless of atmospheric conditions, which sometimes creates these weird stuck cloud formations. We're approaching a critical mass where their presence becomes impossible to conceal. When multiple threshold points activate simultaneously, It creates cascading electromagnetic effects that even civilian instruments can detect. The government will play whack-a-mole with explanations. Based on the internal fights I witnessed, nobody in charge has any idea how to handle what's coming.